Greetings everyone. Today we're going to explore writing linear equations for perpendicular lines. We do have a note sheet for this, but if you do not have it already, you'll want to jot these down in your notebook. First, let's talk about a perpendicular line slope. Perpendicular line slopes are opposite reciprocals. There's two things we need to do to make a slope perpendicular. I'm going to generalize this and I encourage you to jot this down. Opposite means positive versus negative. So if I'm talking about a line going up, it needs to be going down if I want it to be perpendicular. Another way to generalize this would be change the sign. Let's talk about reciprocals. Reciprocals are fractions flipped. That's going to be the generic word you're going to want to jot down. So if I'm talking about 3/4, that would change to 4/3. If I'm talking about 5, that would change to 1/5. If I'm talking about 1/7, that would change to 7. Let's talk about the symbol for perpendicular. The symbol for perpendicular looks like an upside down T. Think about construction, a basic T-square, right? That T-square is going to create a 90-degree angle, which means it's going to be perpendicular. In geometry, you're going to spend more time on this, but we would use the symbol for shorthand to say that line AB is perpendicular to line CD. Let's look at some examples of finding slope. Let's start with a graph. If I look at line A, I'm rising 1, 2, 3, 4, running 1, 2. So if I'm going rise 4, run 2, my slope is positive 2. Let's take a look at the green line. If I'm counting the slope here, I'm going down 2, so negative 2, over, let's run 1, 2, 3, 4. So my slope is negative 1/2. So they are opposite and they are reciprocals. We could also write the equations of the line. In this case, I can use point slope form because I know my y-intercept is positive 6. I could also use SIF for the second line, y equals mx, and my b value is negative 4. Let's take a look at an example finding the slope between points. So remember our formula, y minus y over x minus x. So in the first one, I'm going to use 0, negative 2, and negative 5, negative 3. That becomes a positive 2, negative 2, which simplifies to negative 1. Slope equals negative 1. Let's look at the second line, y minus y, x minus x. If you need help with this topic, you'll want to see the previous video on slope from 2 points. Negative divided by negative is positive 1. My slope is positive 1. Now, believe it or not, these are opposite. See, one's negative, one's positive, and they are reciprocals. Because if I try to flip 1, I still have 1. Let's take a look at slope from a line. Line 1, the y is already isolated, so my slope is 3. On the second line, I need to do some solving work. I'm going to subtract x from both sides. And again, this process we've spent more time on previously, so I'm going to go a little bit fast through it. Y equals 15 divided by 3 is 5. Technically, there's a 1 in front of this x, so I would read this as negative 1/3 x. Make sure you're calculating that correct, which means my slope is the number in front of x. These are opposite and reciprocal slopes, so they are perpendicular. Now, we do have to address vertical lines because vertical lines don't have a slope, they're undefined. So we need a special rule just to clarify that a vertical line and a horizontal line are always perpendicular, meaning we don't have to compare their slopes, they just always are. Let's take a look at this one. In this example, I'm asking you if you know if the lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Meaning, I need to figure out what their slopes are and then decide. So let's look at that first line. Do I know what its slope is? I don't. So I need to divide every piece by 4 first. So I'm going to have y equals negative 5/4 x plus 3. So now I can say that my slope is negative 5/4. Let's look at the second line. The second line says y equals 4/5 x minus 8. The y is isolated, so that's good. My slope is therefore 4/5. So in this case, yes, they are perpendicular because they meet both requirements. They're opposite and reciprocals. Okay, be careful. Sometimes you might be given, for example, what if I gave you these two slopes? There you'd have to say neither. They are opposites, or excuse me, they are reciprocals, but they're not opposite. So in that case, I can't say they're parallel or perpendicular, so these would be neither. Watch out for that on a future learning check. Example 5, now let's really get into the writing equations. I need a line that passes through 12,5, and I want it to be perpendicular to this line. Well, let's look at that line. What is this line's slope? 2/3. So what do I want the perpendicular slope to be? The opposite reciprocal. Flip and change, flip and change, flip and change. We need to memorize that. I want the perpendicular slope, the point, and now I could write in PSF form, point slope form, right? So instead of y, we write subtract 5. Instead of m, we write negative 3/2. And instead of x, we're going to write minus 12. If you need help with this PSF form, you want to see my previous video. Put a star by this one. This is the one that we're going to really work with the most out of everything. Meaning I need to use my point again, and I want my line to be perpendicular to this line. So I've got a point, and my slope needs to be flipped and change the sign. Flip and change the sign. Now I can write my line. Y plus 1 equals negative 1/2 x plus 3. That's our PSF. Now to get to SIF, we need to solve for y. So let's start by distributing. Negative 1/2 x minus 3/2. Drop down the left side. I'm going to subtract 1 over. Y equals negative 1/2 x. Negative 1/2 subtract 1 is negative 2/2, which is negative 5/2. So use calculator or show work, or think of it visually to get to that negative 5/2. So I now have an equation in y equals mx plus b form, which is what I needed. Okay. This is what a lot of our tasks are going to ask for, so just make sure to read the directions and see what you need to write. All right, make sure that you remember opposite reciprocal. It needs to be both of those two options when finding the perpendicular slope. As always, make sure to check out Google Classroom to see what tasks go along with this video. Let me know if you have any questions, and until next time, have a good one.